Sadie's is a proud supporter of New Mexico high school sports and athletics, and we here at Proview Networks would like to thank Sadie's for their continued support in helping us bring you all of your New Mexico high school sports coverage.
Don't sacrifice quality of flavor when you're in a hurry. Golden Pride offers ribs, fried chicken, green and red chili breakfast burritos, and Frontier Cinnabons. 4 great locations, or visit us online at goldenpride@abq.com. Golden Pride Barbecue Chicken and Ribs, proud supporter of Proview Sports Network. Car Crafters, proud supporter of Proview Sports Network.
Are you sure we're supposed to be doing this?
Don't worry, I've watched him do it 1,000 times. Come on, what's the worst that can happen?
No! Bad dog!
Hi, welcome to Car Crafters. What happened?
Don't worry, we'll make it like it never happened.
Car Crafters, it's like it never happened.
The Sports Desk is proudly presented by Car Crafters. It's like it never happened.
And welcome again to the Sports Desk. We're live here on Comcast ProView Channel 26. We're here on Facebook Live, and you can also watch us later on YouTube. I'm Scott Coletti, joined by the crew here today. The man to my left is Ed Nunez, Steve Davis, ProView president to my right. Alden Iowani and the whole crew is here. Josh Luna helping out, and we have Josh Brown and, of course, Jason Poole on hand. It's going to be a busy show today. We'll get right to it. And Ed, I want to start with you. Any surprises that you've seen here in, believe it or not, the first 6 weeks of the football season? It's week 7, by the way.
Well, Cleveland is everyone's perennial choice for #1 in 6A. I really don't see anybody beating them. The Quavo Bears and Cleveland seem to be on a collision course. So I've enjoyed watching their idol this week, but I had a chance to talk to Heath Ridenauer, Cleveland head coach, a couple weeks ago about his defense, which sometimes people forget because of Dorian Lewis and the high potent offense that the Storm have. Las Lunas goes down to Goddard without quarterback Nick Garland and takes the Rockets into overtime. They lose 28-27. That was kind of a surprise because Nick Garland, I thought without him that the Tigers would suffer, and they didn't. They only lost by 1. And I talked to Jeremy Maupin, the Las Lunas head coach, last week. And so it seems like they had a good game plan, although they did come up short. I don't know about Garland's availability for the rest of the year. When I talked to Coach Maupin, he was playing it close to the vest, saying that his status is yet to be determined. Yeah. So a lot of surprises, though. But the other surprise in Class 5A, the Santa Teresa Warriors, still undefeated and untied. The only team in the class.
The only team in the class.
That's a surprise to me.
We'll look at the ratings, the coaches poll here later on, and they haven't really raised up in the coaches poll, so they're not getting the coaches, oomph right now. But very impressive story. To
me, I look at the class. I've been covering Class 5A a lot and watching Class 5A. The Valley Vikings have won 2 in a row. They've got 2 games that they maybe should win. Coming up, and then the reeling Berlin Eagles have lost 2 in a row. So it's highs, lows, it's ups and downs. And I think one of the things we say to each other every football year is how fast it's going. And it's kind of sad to me in a way. I look forward to covering those games, the Friday night lights. There's nothing more exciting to me than watching amateur athletes compete at an amateur level. You know, the thrill, what did Jim McKay say? The thrill of victory and the agony of defeat.
Right.
So I'm really having a good time covering football. And Scott, like we mentioned, basketball is just around the corner, but let's finish football first.
Okay, Steve, you say it every year. You've been saying it every year.
He
for 6
stole my
years now.
thunder, man.
No, well, you haven't finished this thought. What comes up after the football season? It's right around the corner.
It's that selection and seating show, and I think, you know, and then right there, we're right into basketball season, and we're doing so many other,
Right.
it all seems like we'll be at Rio Rancho and Los Lunas in the basketball tournaments, and then we start the new year, and we do, basketball games every night, boys and girls, and,
Yep.
and then we're at the state basketball tournament. It's already there. It's all done. I just don't know who's going to be playing. That's it.
And the thing is, volleyball's been hot and heavy. Soccer, I mean,
just don't forget
Proview's been
those,
doing at least 2 games a week for volleyball. I know soccer's been covered the same. Your thoughts on just the emphasis of getting all these games live? Because there's been more of an emphasis, and I think the schedule kind of, helps out to get these games live, but it's been outstanding, a lot of live games.
Well, I think with me it's more, why are we not doing more? Okay, I guess that's that's the biggest thing, and part of it is just with soccer and volleyball and football. There's just, we can only cover X amount. I mean, we average probably 10 games a week,
Right.
and on a bad, I think last week we had only 6 games, and it was like because of the scheduling, there was just no
There were no games.
So I really feel why aren't we doing more games?
Right. Let's take a look now at the football schedule, the results from last week. We'll get you caught up on what happened. We'll also take a look here in a little bit, the Berlin-Roswell game, as that was at Berlin High School. But right now we're going to go to the graphics with our schedule for week 6, and we'll get to that here momentarily. Surprises, Steve?
Well, I think, really the surprise that I see is how all of a sudden the South is getting in the top 10. I mean, you look at if you look at the top 10 when we first came out with our polls and everything, now how it's changed over the last 6 weeks, and also the teams that are getting better.
There you see some of the scores here. Valley, Volcano Vista, Mayfield over Oñate, all winners on Thursday. Then La Cueva, no problem with Albuquerque High. Atrisco beat Rio Grande, a game that kind of became a disappointment because Rio Grande tried everything. They just couldn't move the ball against the Atrisco Heritage defense. El Dorado without Gabe Smith, no problem with Del Norte. Roswell, Berlin, we'll get in depth on that, Steve, but kind of a surprise, but kind of not a surprise because Roswell's really good.
Well, I think you just said it. Roswell may be the team to beat, and what's exciting about Roswell is that Goddard's number 2, and so you have and then you have Artesia, like it's maybe 17, 18 miles down south. Is
right.
They're in the top 5, so that you got 3 teams within them, 30, 15 minute,
right.
radius. So good football, and just in that area.
Yep, and one game that I wanted to talk to you about, well, there's plenty of games I want to talk to you about, Ed, but one in particular, St. Pius. Close game, but falling to Aztec.
Well, St. Pius had been playing pretty well lately. Their quarterback, Rivera, had been performing pretty well. They've got some good players. The problem that I saw when they played Kirtland Central was their offensive line, but they come up short against Aztec, but only by 4 points, so I still think Pius has some good football left before the season's over.
Take a look at the next slide here as we have other games from last week. As you look at some of the other Friday games, Goddard, that was a game that you mentioned, Ed, a surprise because Los Lunas went down there without their star quarterback and still had a chance to win. Moriarty wins big. Valencia over Bloomfield. Hope Christian over Los Alamos. One of 2 games with 2 as the total for the other team. Unfortunately, your Clovis Wildcats was the other one against the powerhouse from Texas.
Well, you would have to bring Clovis up.
Well, I brought it up more because of who they played. They played a tough team.
Well, they played a tough schedule. I mean, they played a really tough schedule, and the season's not over. District play's coming up, and we'll see what happens with Clovis.
Well, I can honestly say that's probably the toughest team that they'll play all year.
Yeah, no doubt about it. No doubt.
Because I didn't realize how good that team was until I was told about them, and it's like, wow, they're one of Texas's elite.
No question. Look at the score. That tells the story right there.
Yeah, so Artesia getting back on the winning ways against Lovington. You know Artesia is going to be back, Steve.
Well, they have, yes, it's automatic that we're going to see, we're going to see what, if Artesia is number one here in about number three or 4 weeks.
Right. Let's take a look now at the final portion of the games. There's that Cooper score over Clovis. And, man, Cooper, a powerhouse in Texas. Ruidoso and Silver. And you had West Las Vegas beating Clayton, St. Mike's over Santa Fe. And Hobbs 36-21 over Las Cruces. Manal beat Navajo Pine. And a school that James Iotis talked about, all of their games are on the road. They played, I believe, up in Espanola Valley this week against McCurdy. Mission Achievement and Success, which is located over by the airport here in Albuquerque. Their first year playing in Division II, first year playing NMAA, and they've already got 2 wins. But their homecoming was up in Espanola.
You got a lot of challenges. They don't have a home field. They don't, they don't have any home games. So
I think James Iotis said this was their shortest road trip. I think a lot of them were like over 100 miles.
So 2 victories, give them credit. So that's a lot of obstacles to overcome.
You were going to say something, Steve.
Well, I just looked at that Hobbs Las Cruces, and it just shows we've been curious about Hobbs and also Carlsbad. And it just shows you that Hobbs may be a team that's, they've had a tough schedule too, and maybe they're a team that we're kind of overlooking.
So now let's take a look at the highlights if we have them. I believe we have the Belen-Roswell highlights. If not, we'll put the score on the screen anyway. But Belen and Roswell, that was the My 50 game of the week, and Steve Davis. Roswell goes into Belen, and here's the highlights. Let's take a look at these. And, Belen came out throwing, and their quarterback has a really good arm, but then the Roswell's quarterback said, hey, I can do the same thing.
Roswell has had them 2 times on the My 50 game, and they just maybe we have tunnel vision or whatever, but they don't beat themselves.
No, and the thing about them is, as you see this block punt and a return with the score 7-0. The thing about them guys is, at first and for many years, this has been a run-oriented team. And now look, they're airing it out. They're balanced. James Iotis says this is probably the most balanced Roswell team they've had in a while.
I think that's true, but I think the thing that impressed me is they stopped Diego Casillas deep in Roswell territory, and then they turn around and drive 96 yards for a score. So that really impressed me.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, the game really looked good. I mean, you look at these highlights. Look how good this looks from a small Belen stadium. One of my favorite stadiums, by the way. It reminds me of a lot of the smaller school stadiums in the LA area.
I was down there last year covering a playoff game. You're absolutely correct.
And their press box very quaint.
Very nice,
that's what I'm used to. Maybe not even the double deck, the single deck, and that small. And,
right.
That's the. But having said that, it's still a great facility. And then they've got that. They've got that room in the end zone that has suites. If you've never been in there, you need to go in there. It's outstanding.
Well, 2 losses in a row here for the Eagles. They've lost to Piedra Vista, now to Roswell. So I think missing those seniors from last year is finally starting to catch up with Belen a little bit.
In Roswell, you see that highlight. I mean, it's easy to celebrate after a touchdown, but you probably know this better seeing them, Steve. They seem to have a little bit of a swagger, and that swagger seems to be building and building, although after the game, they didn't want to talk about how good they were. They said, hey, we're just one of the teams. We're not number one. We're just trying to fight for what we fight for.
Well, Roswell's always been, maybe the stepchild in the last years to Goddard, and they're kind of trying to make a statement, and they're walking. They don't want any bulletin board material with Goddard and Artesia being in their district. So, I really feel that they got the right attitude and the right mindset. They're just taking 1 week at a time.
And they're able to just break these plays. A few years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, I did the Roswell-Belen game on radio there, and kind of the same story, only Roswell wasn't throwing it as much, but they were just churning up a lot of yards. There's the score there, and there's the rundown. Ethan Valencia with 2 touchdown passes, Justin Carrasco with a TD run, and they're averaging 41.4 points a game, and they play their toughest opponent, they think, El Paso Cathedral this week.
Well, think about this, too. They went down to Las Lunas a couple weeks ago and put it on the Tigers 42-20, go down to Belen and put it on the Eagles 38-8. So that's a pretty good coup coming down to Valencia County and beating two highly regarded teams the way they did.
So your thoughts on that game, Steve?
Well, I really just, Roswell right now, like I said, maybe back to what tunnel vision, they've proven the eye test with me, okay, and it's going to be hard for, and I've seen Artesia play, but Artesia's played a pretty tough 6A district type schedule, so those are going to be two great matchups when they play each other.
And you said something that's very interesting, Steve, because we talk about the eye test. Your eye test is very, very specific, and you're looking for specific things out of both football and basketball teams, so making your eye test is pretty tough.
Right, and I think what I see out of Roswell is they bend but they don't break. Okay, they give up. They let both Los Lunas them in the first half look like it was a close game, and then they made coaches adjustments at halftime, and then the score just plummeted in the second half of both those games.
Well, Steve, as always, we thank you for coming on here.
Well, I appreciate coming on.
Steve Davis, president of Proview Networks, our guest here, co-host also. Here on the Sports Desk, we'll take a break and come right back with first, the top 10 plays of the week, brought to you by Dream Style Remodeling.
Snap, and there's Gory. He is gone.
Second score. It's time to hand it off. Again, a ton of room there, but he might go all the way to the corner and scoot in for the touchdown. Jashawn McDaniel.
Coming his way, but that was by design. It's the halfback screen, and Gory is gone. Tucker on the near side, and Valenzuela's going to go for it all to the end zone. Is it caught?
Pistol, and it is a handoff again, and it's Carrasco, and he broke it this time. Shot out of a cannon and into the end zone. Touchdown. Silva's going to throw it down the middle. It's intercepted. Picked off with a ton of steam ahead. Look out, breaking tackles all the way into the end zone. Touchdown. Field. Messenger's wide open, and he makes a catch across the 40 to the 30. He's got one more man to beat, and he's going to the house. Touchdown, Vikings. Trips up high for Deathridge. He's going to go for it all. A fade to the end zone, looking for Warner. Does he got it? Yes! Touchdown! Fading back the second one tonight from Deathridge to Jacob Warner, and the Hawks are rolling.
Snap now, Petty crossing route over the middle. It's caught. There's Trey Dudon. Breaks two tackles.
Whoa.
He's still going. That's going to be on the top 10 plays of the week. Touchdown, El Dorado.
That was 2 minutes to play in this quarter. The middle to King Mosley with a one-handed catch, and the King could go all the way for the touchdown.
Now that's definitely.
The New Mexico High School Coaches Association, established in 1941, is an organization of New Mexico's best and most professional interscholastic coaches. Coaches across work daily to help our student athletes excel in the classroom, on the field of play, and in our communities. Students that participate in interscholastic activities attain higher grades, higher graduation rates, and higher wages. Responsible for the North-South All-Star Games, statewide Coaches Award Program, and providing multiple professional development opportunities for New Mexico's coaches. Be a great coach by coaching beyond the game.
Well, I'm going to the frontier, walk up to the cashier, order up a root beer and a number one. Cover it with green stuff, one scoop is not enough. Find a booth is real tough, back by the Duke. Meet my family, meet my friends in the quirkiest restaurant I have ever been. All of Albuquerque's favorite spot, it's the Frontier Restaurant.
The Frontier Restaurant is a proud supporter of Proview Sports Network.
Welcome back here to the Sports Desk. Scott Galletti, our thanks to Steve Davis for joining us. We are having a little bit of a hum right now. We'll get that taken care of. Scott Galletti here on the Sports Desk. We're live on Comcast Proview Channel 26, Proview Comcast Channel 26, and also live on Facebook. And you can also see us later on YouTube, as it'll be posted right after the show. I'm joined by Ed Nunez, thanks to Steve Davis. And, you know, we were talking about a lot of things with the high school season. It seems like a lot of haves and not so a lot more, not a lot of haves and more have-nots, but, you know, we've seen, especially this past week, a little better quality of games where it's not all blowouts.
Yes.
But most of the better games were out of the area.
That's right. You know, we mentioned the Belen-Roswell game, although that turned into be a blowout. But there's certain teams, and we mentioned this before. You said this before the season started. A lot of teams, there was about a handful of teams, you said, and you weren't wrong, that have the talent in 6A. And, you know, some of the other teams have middle-of-the-road talent, and some other teams just don't have the numbers. So I think you're absolutely correct in that assessment. And, again, it's just hard for me to believe it's week 6 now.
7. No, we've completed week 6.
Man.
That makes it even more of a, wow, where did the season go?
And then plus, the playoffs are earlier this year, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, we've got 5 more weeks. So we got 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, and then it's right into the playoffs.
And some real key games, as you mentioned, those district games between Roswell, Goddard, Roswell, and Artesia. Man, those are going to be some real head knockers towards the end of the year. And I think one of the things that Steve said about the Artesia Bulldogs, they did play that tough schedule. They lost to, they lost to Cleveland, they lost to Hobbs, and the people down there in Artesia, they're probably saying, look, we're fine. We're right where we want to be. Mm-hmm. We've won 30. What have you won?
Right.
So they're not worried, right? But I'll tell you one thing: the way the Goddard Rockets are playing, Roswell Goddard Rockets and the Roswell Coyotes right now, the Coyotes look to me to be the #1 team in that class. Yeah. But the road to any 5A championship we know goes through Artesia. That's the bottom line.
No, it is the bottom line, and Steve Davis said the same thing. It's like he said, yeah. Until someone knocks them off the shelf, they're always going to be there.
That's right. Although right now,
even a couple of years ago when they lost the St. Pius, it's like, we'll be back, and then they come right back and win another,
the next
and
year.
It's like nothing.
There's 30 for you.
So exactly.
I still remember. Again, I've said this before, but Richard Tripp and I covered that game 2 years ago, and I remember going down on the field with Richard, and just the aura about the invincibility that Artesia had, even in their drills, methodical, mechanical, like. What do you want? We've got, just the way they approached it. We're going to win.
Right.
Just that aura of invincibility. And that day they did get beat, but as you mentioned, they just rolled around next year. And you really think about it, beat Berlin pretty handily down at Bulldog Bowl last year. So even if they lose 1 or 2, you can never say they're out of the picture. They still linger in the background. People measure themselves against the Artesia Bulldogs. That's just the way it is.
Well, ordinarily this time of year, we would give you standings as well. We'll start that next week, as a lot of the districts starting this week in district play, but some districts have already started, District 3 and 6A. Let's take a look at the coaches poll, the NMOTSC coaches poll. We'll look at 3A first. And Hope Christian still number 1. Robertson up to number 2 now. Dexter, Socorro, St. Mike's is number 5. West Las Vegas, they've crept up and they're number 6.
I had a chance to interview Robertson running back Antonio Padilla on Sunday for the Gridiron Prep Talk show that we do, and I'll tell you something, he's a very impressive player. He's got a lot of all-purpose yards for the Cardinals, and keep an eye on them. Remember, they lost last year to Ruidoso, 57-54 in a thrilling championship, and he mentioned they beat Ruidoso earlier this year, and they're happy about that, but of course he knows they have bigger fish to fry down the way. So keep an eye on the Cardinals, although right now, Hope Christian going up the hill to Los Alamos, and 45-2 over the Hilltoppers. Right now, they're the runaway best team in that class.
So look at 4A now, and you look at Taos, they're number 1. Lovington, Ruidoso, Portales, Kirtland Central, St. Pius rounds it out at number 6, and you got Aztec, Silver, Bloomfield, and Grants. And Aztec, yes, they did pull off a victory last week, and that was very impressive. But you got Taos at number 1.
Well, you look at the team that surprised me is Kirtland Central. I had them about a month ago against St. Pius, and I really wasn't overly impressed. But they've had a couple of victories down the last couple of weeks here, so keep an eye on the Broncos. They've been steadily climbing in the polls.
5A poll now here in the football coaches poll, and you got Roswell at number 1. Goddard 2nd, Artesia 3rd, Los Lunas is number 4, Santa Teresa, they're undefeated, but they're number 5.
If you look at Santa Teresa, and the coach of Vieta, I talked to him last week, Shea Vieta, the coach of the Desert Warriors, admitted that the schedule has been kind of favorable towards them. They've got to bye until they play Roswell Goddard, so that really, Santa Teresa has a good test coming up, although they did go on the road and beat Valencia Jaguars a couple weeks ago, 14-7. But they've got to test against, they've got to bye, and it'll get them time to get their quarterback, Isaiah Velasquez, had an ankle injury, and that'll give them time to get him ready. But they're a real test, and again, they've had tests, but they're undefeated and untied, and they're ranked number 5. And the teams ahead of them, you can't make an argument that they should jump those teams. But I'm kind of anxious to see how they do against Goddard.
Well, it's time to, speaking of test, it's time to look at this week's schedule, the overall schedule, if you will. We'll break down a specific game after the break, but some of the tests are coming up as districts are all starting. In District 1, they had the week off last week. Cleveland at Atrisco. How about going into a new district and having to play the number 1 team in the first week?
And plus a team that had a bye week and had 2 weeks to prepare for you. Well-rested Cleveland Storm team, and I think everyone's perennial consensus number 1 team. So, man, I don't envy Atrisco Heritage this week.
Manzano La Cueva, that's a game that needs a little bit of going over because last year that was the championship game, won by Manzano. Well, Manzano lost a lot. La Cueva, even though they lost some of their main pieces on their defense, they still have most of their offense back, and they're tough, and their defense is tough. So, if I were a betting man, I'd say that this is going to be La Cueva's game, but it's a district game, it's a rivalry game, so throw out the records out the window.
Well, here's the thing. Manzano's had 2 weeks to prepare for La Cueva. If you're La Cueva and head coach Brandon Back, you know that they're going to give it to Xavier Ivy-Sod 25, 30 times a game. You stack the box with 8 and make quarterback Dakota Powell beat you. He's got Jack Blankenship as a receiver. He scored on a 72-yard pass 2 weeks earlier. So that's what I would try to do is stack the line and make Dakota Powell beat us. They lost receiver Jace Melfi, Manzano did, to an injury, so they're kind of hurting at the wideout position, but that's the kind of strategy I might think about if I'm La Cueva head coach Brandon Back.
Clovis at Sandias, that's always a interesting game, Sandia and Clovis.
Sandia's been up and down and kind of mostly down the last couple of weeks. I know head coach Kevin Barker for Sandia was excited at the start of the year, but they've had a real brutal schedule, Scott. They really have.
Volcano Vista and West Mesa. This is a Volcano Vista team that's trying to continue to show that they belong in the mix, but they have to prove it. Obviously, in a couple of weeks, they're going to be playing Cleveland. The score will be settled, so to speak, on who is the best in district, but right now they got to keep winning their games, and this week it's against West Mesa.
I think they've lost one, if I'm correct.
La Cueva opening game, yep.
So if you remember, they led that game 21-14, and all of a sudden La Cueva poured it on them. And if you remember, Volcano Vista had a lot of special team gaffes that game, that maybe the game might have gone the other way. But as you mentioned, they have to keep. West Mesa's got a good quarterback. Cameron Schreier's a good quarterback, and they've got some good playmakers. But Volcano Vista really has to, as you mentioned, keep their momentum going. They should against West Mesa on Friday night, but we'll see.
Other games on the schedule as we look at the rest of Friday's games. Deming and Belen, that's the next team up for Belen. They face off against Deming. Then you got Manal against Magdalena, Gadsden, Carlsbad, Oñate, Hobbs, Centennial at Las Cruces.
Centennial still undefeated, I believe. So Las Cruces up and down so far this year. And, they win 2 and then they lose 1, win 1 and lose another one. So they've been kind of not playing the kind of football we're used to seeing from Las Cruces.
Look at the rest of the schedules. We go to Saturday, and you got Rio Rancho Cibola, New Center Community Stadium, Valley del Norte among the local games.
Judge Chavez has a chance here. They've won 2 in a row. They've had some injuries, and I think that bye week really helped the Vikings get some players healthy. Now, again, as I mentioned, they've won 2 in a row. They play a Del Norte team that's won 1 game, and I believe they have a game. I can't remember who they play next week, but it's not against a top-ranked team. So they have a chance to, maybe win. Again, you hate to look ahead, and if I asked Judge Chavez, he'd say, hey, we're looking at Del Norte. But I think the Vikings, having that bye week, got some players healthy, and I still think they can make some noise in the district, but we'll see.
We will take a break right now and come back with more here on the Sports Desk on Proview, Comcast Channel 26.
Get into the game with Garden Swartz Team Sales. They have everything you need, from screen printing, embroidery, and digital printing services, high school letterman jackets, and all high school and club uniforms and individual and team apparel with the most reliable brands like Speedline, Rollins, and Wilson. And don't forget to check out the latest F7 Shut helmet. It's all at Garden Swartz Team Sales. Give them a call, 505-884-1234. Garden Swartz Team Sales.
Folks, there's no other way but to be all in. Either he's Lord of all or he is not Lord at all. And you can experience the real and authentic, true life change that only God can provide to humanity. See, when we truly encounter Jesus and purpose to know him and follow his teachings, #life change will occur.
The Barley Brew, a proud sponsor of Proview Networks for over 9 years, is pleased to introduce Black Iron Catering. From weddings and family reunions to birthdays and office parties, Black Iron Catering is perfect for any event. Contact Jamie at 505-459-8259 and book your event today. Black Iron Catering. Let us bring our kitchen to you.
Proview Network crew, assemble!
That's good for first.
High school sports are back live on Proview Sports Network.
Use my death as an excuse to screw your life up. Keep going.
Welcome back here to the Sports Desk. I'm Scott Galletti, joined by Ed Nunez. Thanks again to Steve Davis, Proview president, as he joined us in the first segment, as we try to always get him on the show. Last week, he filled in for you, Ed, and glad to have you back.
Well, you know what, Steve Davis, man, Hall of Fame, nominee, and it's great to see that. We talked about with him a little bit about that. And I want to tell you this, okay? So, Steve's done a lot for Proview Networks and a lot for athletics around the state. There's no doubt about it. But I remember the night that they played UTEP. I remember that like it was yesterday because, some players had walked out on then head coach Norm Ellenberger. And I was right there with Cibola head coach Ray Rodriguez, who's a friend of mine at that time. We're young, right? And Steve scored 22, I believe, and Dan Davis had 21. And nobody thought the Lobos were going to beat UTEP that night, and they did. And I remember Steve had a big part of that, you know, and it was a great game for him. And the pit, of course, was the pit at that time, full house, 18,000. And one of the things that I do remember, and I'll never forget it, the players that had walked out on Coach Ellenberger were all seated together in the student section. And so they get up to leave with about a minute or so left, and the whole pit turned on them. Man, I'll never forget that. So, you know, again, there's a lot of memories, and you know, best of luck to Steve in getting in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. You know, as we mentioned, it's a great honor. I was at the induction ceremony a couple years ago, and you know, the who's who. Whenever you go there, you hear the names Buddy Robertson, Petey Gibson, Hugh Hackett, Alan Sir Sr., Ira Harge. I mean, it's a who's who.
I haven't had a chance to go to the dinner yet because of my schedule. I've been out of town the times that they've held the dinner, but I've always been at when they hold the announcements downtown at the convention center. They have the inductees speaking originally long before. It's usually around one of the Lobo games, and they get introduced at the Lobo games. I go to that, and like you said, who's who. Man. And even the people who aren't being nominated that particular year, it's always a lot of the who's who from the past who come. So it's amazing.
You know what? When I saw the plaques, you know, and I sat Tommy McDonald. I sat there and read a lot of them, you know, because I remember them. Michael Cooper, Don Perkins, Brian Urlacher. So, you know, best of luck to Steve in getting in there. You know, it'd be a great honor for him and a well-deserved one.
Switching back to football, we have an interesting game coming up on Thursday. It'll be La Cueva and Manzano as they go at it. And you look at the records, 2-3 for Manzano, 6-0 for La Cueva. Manzano had a bye week last week. Unfortunately, we don't have the updated La Cueva stats, so we have to just kind of go with the little write-up there. The stats for Manzano are up to date. Dakota Powell with 755 passing yards. Ivy Sod, 695. That should actually be rushing yards, but you get the point.
Austin Erickson, the younger brother of former Manzano receiver Andrew Erickson, is starting to come in. He had over 100 yards in receptions against West Mesa. So there's another weapon that the Monarchs can use. Maybe they'll use him on. I think if you're La Cueva head coach Brandon Beck, like I said, you stack. You know, you're going to want to stack the line. I think with 8. So maybe they can use Erickson on a couple of jet sweeps, things like that, to kind of ease that front 8, or you know, the way they're going to stack that box. I would think, because if I'm Brandon Beck, I would make Dakota Powell. He's a good quarterback, but I don't want Xavier Ivy Sod getting 200 yards and 40 carries. That's a formula for Manzano to win with the ball control. So I'm kind of trying to take that game plan out of the Monarchs' hands if I'm Brandon Beck.
Okay, we're going to break out something new this season, something that I've been wanting to do since week 1, but I have to wait to make sure that things are up to date. And if you want to send me your stats, it's capital S, capital G, ALE 1960 at AOL.com. You can also do it at Scott Galletti on Twitter. We'll get your stats in if one of your players is one of the leaders, but we go by max preps. We're going to go top performers on the season so far, and we'll look at the quarterback spot, and you see some of the out-of-the-area players. Mason Caperton from Eunice with 1,491 yards, 18 touchdowns, 2 interceptions in 6 games.
Love to hear it. Love to hear other teams from out of the area, and Eunice isn't a team that we always talk about, so love it.
And Hobbs quarterback, 1,281. We're talking about a guy who had a lot of big shoes to fill.
Boy, did he. And again, I think the only, they've thrown it so much, the 8 interceptions would be kind of a concern for me, but they, the 1,281 yards and 13 touchdowns certainly is fine stats there.
Let's take a look now at the running backs. And the running backs, you see a couple of locals. Ivy Sod, his stats are correct. 115 carries, 695 and 5 touchdowns. DeAndre Williams, well, this is after 4 games and they've played 6, but we wanted to get him up there. He's one of the top running backs in the state. After 4 games, he had 661 yards.
He's amazing. You know, one of the games that we did a couple weeks ago, he ran through a crowd, and I don't know how in the heck he found his way to the end zone, but it was just a brilliant run, and he's an exciting player to watch. There's no doubt about it.
And, of course, there's a guy missing there because I don't have the numbers, so I should have put his name because he's by far the the best running back. That's a young man from Cleveland.
Yeah, Dorian Lewis, and I'll tell you one thing.
Ridiculously good.
Coach Ridenauer's, plays those numbers close to the vest because I asked him a couple weeks ago what the numbers were, and he's been great. I just didn't get too much of an answer there. But, he may not want people to know how dominant he is, but he's already well over 1,000 yards for the year.
Right. And let's go to the wide receivers now, and you see Robbie Jaramillo from Valencia. 952 receiving yards, 49 receptions, 13 TDs. Antonio Padilla from Las Vegas, 20 catches, 722. And again, if you want to get on this list, the only way I can do it is go by max preps. Otherwise, there's too many teams to go individually.
And I'll tell you one thing, you do a great job. It takes a lot of time to do that and compile the stats that you do. And it'd be great if coaches, reached out and let you know how they're, if you look at Valencia too. Valencia, the quarterback and the receiver, Jaramillo there, under new head coach Wes Shank. Before, the Jaguars were a grinded-out running team.
Right,
now they've turned into...
And that's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up because, that's very true. We always talked about the running attack, and now they're mixing it up and airing it out.
Well, they've turned it into Air Coryell, and it reminded me, somebody had brought out the Chargers the other day, and man, what an air attack they had back in the day. But all of a sudden, Valencia has definitely done a 360 as far as their offensive philosophy goes for this year.
Well, the young man on the bottom, I got a chance to see in the playoffs last year at Cleveland, Samaj Cotton, very impressive. He's got speed, he's got hands, he can do it all.
Yeah, you know what? They've got some great skill players up there in Hobbs, no doubt.
So now let's take a look at the coaches' poll in volleyball. We'll look at 3A first, and there you see St. Mike's at the top spot, Robertson, Santa Fe Indian, Navajo Prep, Tularosa. Sandia Prep is down to number 6. Your thoughts?
You know what? Look at St. Mike's and Robertson were number 1 and 2. My understanding is they play next Thursday up at St. Mike's, so that is going to be one heck of a matchup up there at St. Mike's.
And now let's go to 4A. And St. Pius back out on top. Hope Christian at number 2. That's kind of a good back and forth, Ed.
Yeah, you know what? It has been all year.
It seems like every week one of those two teams usurps the other.
Pius has been climbing. I think they started at 5, and now they're at number 1. So good program over there at St. Pius.
Absolutely. Academy is up to number 4. And let's take a look now at 5A. A lot of former 6A teams in this, and a lot of former 5A teams still in 5A. But you got, La Cueva, Sandia, Las Cruces, Centennial, and Rio Rancho, 1 through 5. Piedra Vista is number 6. Cibola at number 7. They were the Metro champs.
Yeah, I was watching, I think, El Dorado and Cibola last week. We covered that
they
game.
were in the championship match, I should
say. For Proview Network. So, that was a really good match that we covered. And look at Toby Manzanares and the Rio Rancho Rams right there at number 5.
You know, Toby Manzanares, I've gotten to know him a lot. I covered a lot of high school volleyball, college volleyball. I did play-by-play at Long Beach State in the past, but I covered 7 years of high school. I was the guy who, hey, you're going to go do volleyball because no one else wanted to do it. And so I go out, and I fell in love with it. I got to do a lot of state championships. I got to cover a lot of mythical national champions in the Los Angeles area for USA Today. And Toby Manzanares reminds me of a lot of the coaches that I got to meet out in L.A. He's a gym rat. He's a volleyball rat. I mean, he's just all about his players, and he does everything he can. Every coach in the state does the same thing, but, you know, the man knows volleyball like the back of his hand.
No doubt about it, but I think, you know, he's also the former head coach of St. Pius. And one of the things that I've noticed about him, he's been a friend of mine for many, many years. We worked together at a community center 35 years ago, so I've known Toby for years. I think one of the things is, and you mentioned this about all coaches, he's more than just a coach. He's a father figure. He's so much more. And he's just a great guy. He really is. Comes from a great family. I have all the respect in the world for him, and he wants the most for his girls that are in his program, but more than just in the volleyball way. How are they doing in school? You know, things like that. He's just a mentor. He means so much to that program.
Let's take a break, and we will come back. One more segment of the Sports Desk here on Proview Network's Comcast 26 and Facebook.
Sadie's is a proud supporter of New Mexico high school sports and athletics, and we here at Proview Networks would like to thank Sadie's for their continued support in helping us bring you all of your New Mexico high school sports coverage.
Don't sacrifice quality of flavor when you're in a hurry. Golden Pride offers ribs, fried chicken, green and red chili breakfast burritos, and Frontier Cinnabons. 4 great locations or visit us online at goldenpride@abq.com. Golden Pride Barbecue Chicken and Ribs, proud supporter of Proview Sports Network. Car Crafters, proud supporter of Proview Sports Network.
Are you sure we're supposed to be doing this?
Don't worry, I've watched him do it 1,000 times. Come on, what's the worst that could happen?
No! Bad dog! Hi, welcome to Car Crafters. What happened?
Don't worry, we'll make it like it never happened.
Car crafters, it's like it never happened.
The Sports Desk is proudly presented by Car Crafters. It's like it never happened.
The New Mexico High School Coaches Association, established in 1941, is an organization of New Mexico's best and most professional interscholastic coaches. Coaches across work daily to help our student athletes excel in the classroom, on the field of play, and in our communities. Students that participate in interscholastic activities attain higher grades, higher graduation rates, and higher wages. Responsible for the North-South All-Star Games, statewide Coaches Award Program, and providing multiple professional development opportunities for New Mexico's coaches. Be a great coach by coaching beyond the game.
Well, I'm going to the frontier, walk up to the cashier, order up a root beer and a #1. Cover it with green stuff, 1 scoop is not enough. Find a booth is real tough, back by the Duke. Meet my family, meet my friends in the quirkiest restaurant I have ever been. All of Albuquerque's favorite spot, it's the Frontier Restaurant.
The Frontier Restaurant is a proud supporter of Proview Sports Network.
And we are back here on the Sports Desk. I'm Scott Galletti, joined by Ed Nunez. Thanks to Steve Davis for coming on in segment number 1, also the co-host of the show. And now we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about the University of New Mexico. We're going to talk about the football game and what's coming up, but first, I want to talk a little bit about a big loss. Big news last week was that it was the first day of official basketball practice on Friday. 1 day later, they lose one of their up-and-coming stars, Jaquan Lyle.
Well, I didn't know, and then you and I were messaging each other back and forth like we do a lot. And you said, "Did you hear about what happened to Jaquan Lyle?" And I'm like, "No, what?"
Well, I got the news from Jeff
Right.
Grammer, so I had the inside scoop.
Yeah,
so.
no, you did, and I'm glad you told me. And I think it's a huge loss. There's no doubt about it. We've talked about his impact. The transfer from Ohio State. Coach Weir was really looking forward to him being a part of the offense, and they were talking about him playing mostly the 2, maybe some 1.
Mm-hmm.
So you lost a player that plays 2 positions there. Now, the only silver lining, and there's never a silver lining when anybody gets hurt, is it's before the season. So they have time to absorb that a little bit, and make another plan or have another plan. But here's the thing: when you have a veteran player that you were counting on, a transfer that you were going to put in these positions, he's going to stretch the floor. He's going to, he knows what to do. He's a smart player, and then you don't have him. It doesn't mean the season's over. No, of course not. But the plans that you had for this player who's going to contribute
Big plans.
mightily,
Big plans.
It changes everything. So
Yes.
Coach Weir has to dig into his bag of tricks. And, again, we've never seen Jaquan Lyle on the floor. We've heard what his impact. The impact hadn't been felt, so we're not missing it from that point. It is only a projected impact, but I'm not trying to downplay it. I know what it means to the Lobos. When I heard that, my heart sank a little bit because I was already looking forward to it, what they might do with him, and now they got to figure it out.
Yeah, well, the impact comes from practice. They've been practicing with him as one of the focal points, and now you have to kind of reshuffle the deck and see who the next guy is.
That's huge when you just mentioned that.
It is
because
huge,
he's been
and I've
practicing.
seen that be
Right.
the case. I've seen injuries to Drew Gordon and different players in the past, and where Steve Alford and company had to reshuffle the deck and kind of see, okay, you go in, and you're going to be the guy. And Philip McDonald was a good case. He was usually that guy who would step in for other guards that got injured, but the coaches will not use it as an excuse. I know Paul Weir the class act that he is, he will not use it as an excuse. But at the same time, he's thinking, what am I going to do now?
He may be thinking that for the moment, but as a coach, and you've been around coaches, you've covered lots of basketball and football and volleyball and a lot of other things. As the coach, you can lament that for a second, a minute, and then
they've got plan A, plan B, plan D. They got
him and Brandon Mason are getting together right now as we speak and saying, hey. But I think the thing that you mentioned is the presence and the practice and the experience. He's been practicing with them for almost a year and a half, 2 years now.
Right.
Or, so Jeff Grammer wrote this too, that he's not sure.
At least a year, and then a year plus this summer.
This summer, gosh.
So, at least a year. It might be a year and a half, depending on when he transferred, but a minimum year.
So we'll have to see. Again, he's got still some eligibility. He can ask for a medical hardship, but then Jeff Grammer wrote that it's taken him a long time to get to even his junior year.
Right.
So we'll have to see, about what his future holds here. Hopefully he's going to come back, and he said he was. We'll see.
The one thing that I want to mention, Ed, is there's always been that that talk and the concern about kids getting on Twitter. Well, Jeff Grammer retweeted what Jaquan Lyle said on his Twitter, and the guy couldn't sound more upbeat about, hey, I'll overcome this, we'll get through this, I'll be there for my teammates and everything else. And it's like, it almost sounded like, like nothing happened. To me, that's a kid with a good head on his shoulders.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know that I could have that attitude because I would be so.
I don't think I could either.
I would be so, so depressed, so disappointed. It's not his fault, right? And those Achilles are, no one injury is anyone's fault. So yeah, that tells me a lot about him. So maybe we will see him in a Lobo uniform next year. I know everyone's really looking forward to it.
One thing that people were looking forward to was homecoming for the Lobo football team. The outcome they weren't looking forward to, and what an eye-opener it was, and lots of concerns, and that's before you talk about Tavaka Tuioti being knocked out for the season, Ed, as Liberty comes in on homecoming and beats the Lobos.
Well, I was listening to Dontrell Moore on the radio, and one of the concerns they had about Tavaka Tuioti was, could he stay healthy a full season? Now, and Dontrell Moore said this too. The injury-prone tag isn't fair. It's not fair. He got hit twice, and when you're running any part of that option, he got hurt against Wisconsin, and we saw Cole Gauchi get hurt. We saw Lobo quarterbacks that have been injured. So he's out for the year. Sherion Jones came in and played well, but he did throw 3 picks. I'll be honest with you, Scott. When you and I, again, were messaging each other on Saturday, and when the score is 42-10, I had kind of given up. And then you said Lobos are coming back, so then I tuned back in.
I know. I've got it on Gamecast. I'm working, and I happen to have it on Gamecast as you looked at Liberty coming into the stadium. The thing about Liberty, it was only their 4th game in FBS, but they've beaten some pretty good FBS teams as an FCS team, and one of them last year was Baylor. I didn't even realize that was while they were still FCS.
And you said it wasn't going to be an easy game, and one of the things that Lobo defensive coordinator Kevin Cosgrove wanted to do was cover these Liberty receivers one-on-one, and it backfired.
Yeah, well, that was the thing. I had called this game a guaranteed win for the Lobos. I got texts from people from out of state who told me, do some homework before you go blurting that out. And then I did the homework, and I'm thinking, there's no way the Lobos are going to stop this, because they had 3, I don't know if the word NFL quality wide receivers, but 3 top-notch receivers and a quarterback who could get the ball to them.
And you know what? You were proven right, and they couldn't stop it.
Unfortunately, because, no one saw this coming, but, when you got a quarterback, that's probably the best quarterback they faced all year, throwing the ball.
And their UNLV's missing their quarterback this week, so it might be the best quarterback they'll face for a bit.
Right.
And the Lobos just couldn't stop them defensively, and the defense, unfortunately, at this point of the season, is leaking like a sieve, and I'm sorry to say that.
Now, the best thing, and a lot of people talk about the comeback, because as you'll see here in a little bit, it was 42-10 at halftime. And the last time the Lobos gave up 42 points at home, I believe, was 2 years ago against Boise State.
Yes, and when I heard that, I think the last score before the half, I was listening. I'm like, man, I just couldn't believe they really drove up and down the field.
Well, they went through a stretch where I think they scored on 3 or 4 straight possessions, forced turnovers, got picks, and both Both quarterbacks, or all three quarterbacks, had interceptions in this game.
And there's a block punt as well for another, safety or score there for Liberty. So they scored in special teams. They scored offensively. They just were a machine. They couldn't be stopped.
But the comeback that the Lobos made, is this was one of the first half touchdowns that produced a dagger. It was quite a comeback. This made it 35-10, but it was one of those situations, Ed, where the Lobos mounted a furious comeback, and I kept texting you saying, they're going to win this game, because I didn't see the game. I had no idea what was happening. But the Lobos went through a stretch where they scored every time they had the ball at one juncture in the second half.
Yeah, great comeback, but remember, moral victories aren't going to get you where you want to be.
I know.
One of the things we talked about, they claimed 18,000. I don't know if it was 18,000 or not. And now going forward, you have to wonder how many people are going to come out to Dreamstyle Stadium and watch this team. And you know what? That's still my team. I'm going to follow them. I'll go to the games. I didn't go Saturday. I couldn't. But I'm still going to follow them.
Well, defense forced a lot of 3-and-outs. I think you told me that their quarterback was cramping a little bit, and the altitude was getting to them and all that good stuff. And
They were
I heard
getting
that
tired
from a few people. They were getting gassed, and it was one of those situations. The Lobos, they're kind of you got to like their conditioning, because they're built for this.
They are. They definitely are, Scott. It's just, unfortunately at the end, Coach Davies said this in the paper, that he really thought the Lobos were going to make a stop and come back and win the game. And I think there was that long third down play for 50 yards, and that just broke the Lobos back.
Yeah, absolutely. You see people leaving there, and, a lot of disappointment. But, the Lobos, they weren't finished. They kept trying to come back, and at this point, it was a good move there, getting in for a touchdown. And, like you said, that 50-yard play set up a field goal. Then they had an interception. There was a little bit of post-game controversy in the post-game interview. But the bottom line, it was a loss for the Lobos. And whereas a lot of fans were talking, hey, this team might go 3-1, well, now they're 2-2, and now they have to go to UNLV. But we'll look at that game here in a second. But look at the total yardage, over 1,100 yards of total yards in this game.
Well, you know what? They did pile up the yards, and one encouraging, fact for me is Delane Hart-Johnson, 5 catches, 88 yards. I think we need to see more of him, and hopefully they'll find a way to use him. He's a big target, NFL size. Delane Hart-Johnson has that, so hopefully they'll find a way to package him in different creative ways.
Stephen Calvert, 417 yards, 3 TDs, and an interception. Tuioti is, we think, his last game of the season for the Lobos. 57 yards passing, also had about 50 yards rushing. Sharon Jones, 312 yards, 4 TDs, 3 interceptions, but he came out as a gunslinger.
No, he did, and he had to, and I think he was much more comfortable. They had scaled back the package at New Mexico State in Las Cruces, and this time they had to let him go. There's no saying, hey, we're not going to run this play or that play. The whole package was open to him on Saturday. And remember, he had missed time in camp because of a hamstring, and I think he's much more comfortable with the Lobo offense than he was when the season started.
One last thing, the next game coming up, the Lobos at UNLV, and you mentioned the quarterback being out. Would that be Armani Rogers, or is that another quarterback?
I didn't. I just saw UNLV going to be missing their quarterback. I'm guessing it's Rogers. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm guessing it's him.
Well, as you can see, the passing yards aren't a lot, but the rushing yards are. So if he's out of the game and that's him, that's going to be a major blow to them. And Sharon Jones, I think the biggest thing is he got into a groove. And I think if the Lobos game plan for Sharon Jones and kind of look at that kind of groove, they might have things going. The initial line I saw was about 13-point favorites for UNLV, but I think that line was dropping, and perhaps because of the quarterback.
Think about it, though. Colton Gerhardt's still a couple of weeks away from coming back, as far as the backup quarterback for New Mexico. They've got Sharon Jones, but the Lobo quarterback position, Scott, as we know, they have to have a solid backup, man, and I don't know who it's going to be. I think it's Bryson Carroll, I believe.
Final minute, Ed, your thoughts?
Well, here we go. Week 6 is going to be over. Week 6 is over.
Yeah.
So
this is week 7.
Yeah.
You're in denial, dude.
No, I know. I keep trying to say no. It's really not happening, but it is.
It's going quick.
You know what? Again, just covering these games has been so exciting for me, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the season because there's nothing like playoff football either.
Right.
I remember going to Berlin last year and watching them play Roswell, covering that game. going up to Las Vegas. I might have had the best championship there was when
I think you did,
Ruidoso
actually.
beating
I think you
Robertson
did
in
have
the
the
last
best championship
That
game.
might have been the best game that
Yep.
of
Especially
that weekend.
scoring-wise. I mean, that Manzano La Cueva game was outstanding, but you had a lot of points.
No, we did.
And a close one back and forth.
57-54. So yeah,
So
just looking
get
forward
out
to
to
more.
the games. Tune in here to Proview Comcast 26 and My 50 for the game of the week. And want to thank everyone. Josh Luna doing a great job. Alden Iowani as our producer-directors. Steve Davis, thanks to him. For Ed Nunez, I'm Scott Galletti. Talk to you next week on the Sports Desk.